we are going to just see further more policies. Before we jump into that one, like we just cover about the overview. So we started with creating and how to create an API. So like this module 3 is about deep dive into API management, understand more in detail about how API management service works. So to begin with, so we started with what is maybe API management and what is the life cycle of your API management. So like you start from your discovery of your API, then going back to your API designer, then building an API, publishing an API, then analyzing API, then consuming an API and monetizing that API. So these are the major lifecycle components. And coming back to your API typical use case, so when it comes to your digital enterprise application, most of your digital enterprise application connects with microservice architecture. To have a microservice architecture, so API plays a major role over there, and also any digital app or any kind of a consumer-facing app, they need to have real-time API integration. So API plays a major role into give a synchronous API response within 30 seconds or 20 seconds, because consumer, if it goes beyond that one, they will see a timeout from their side. And also as a microservice, so you can actually create a number of service club into one API, or you can publish each and every microservice as an API, because so to decentralize the functionality for multiple product usage. Okay, so then the key component of your API management, we touched upon API provider. So API provider is the backbone of your API, where with API provider, you will be creating a system connectivity, which is going to be your S/4HANA system connectivity. And then you are going to check upon another systems like a CPI. You can also use Open Connector to expose any of your third-party system API to the outside world. And also, then you can also use, if it is a cloud system, let's take an example, you want to publish your SuccessFactors API, or if you want to publish your Ariba API in that case, so you can use this API management, and in the API management, you can use actually API provider, and with the API provider, you can create those things. So then coming back to your creation of API, also it's possible through API URL, and another option is through actually reusing the same API proxy. So we actually seen an example how to create an API using API proxy. But so some of the parameters we need to transfer when you go from one API to another API. So that we can see in coming sessions, like there is some kind of parameter passing we need to do. I'll show you that one also. So then coming back to your API designer. So API designer is nothing but actually when you start your open API development, so you can define your API documentation by creating an API designer thing, and then we can move forward from there. So then next role is something like how do I create an API with multiple policies. So you can use multiple policies to add more security layer to it. So let's take we talked about almost 10 to 15 policies. I will go around other set of policies and how you can use those policies in the real world to have the full-fledged API gateway as a secured gateway for your backend system. Other key components of your API management are your product creation and application. So product is nothing but clubbing multiple API proxy into a single product. So this is all business. These are all actually mostly on a business application need. So, and also like example in the supply chain world, if I want to do for an inventory adjustment, so that API is related to inventory adjustment, I can club together. So another one is I want to go ahead for a wholesale order creation. So you'll be having multiple APIs so that you can actually club together into a single API bundle. So this is all something like a business process related definition, which you can use your API product creation as a reference, and you can publish those products to your outside world. And the main usage of API product is just to add some more layer of governance to your existing API. So, and also you can have a tight governance in such a way you can create a key and you can rotate your key based on your different subscribers. So with your API product, you will have multiple subscribers, and you can create a key for individual subscribers, and you can actually even change a key when you see these keys have been shared across. Then you can restrict your governance to a particular subscribers too. So then coming back to your API application creation. So in this case, like you will club multiple API product into one API application. So that those are all like a real world. It's very it's not common in use, but most of the customers, they are actually going ahead with creation of only API proxy, not other things like. And also additional components like in your API managements are actually monitored, like monitoring of your API, testing of your API. Then you can also have deep analytics. So let's take an example. I want to generate a report where in the report I want to see how many failure for a particular API for the past 20 days. So because some consumer is telling I'm repeatedly getting 503 gateway time or 503 service unavailable, or I'm getting 502 bad gateway, or I'm getting 504 gateway timeout. So you can actually have a deep dive of all the HTTP session codes by creating an analytic graph, and you can see which date these errors are occurred, how many occurrence, and everything. You can create holistic report, and you can actually send to your SAP for analysis, or you can send to your development team, S4 system, based on the error message. Like if it is 503, you can send to your basis team and check why the system is unavailable on during the time and everything. And also you can even consume your API directly from your API hub. So for that one, you need to establish a single sign-on between your API hub and your integration suite. In that case, you will have a hand in hand actually API Business Hub single sign-on process, so that you can consume or configure that API directly to your API management. Okay, so these are all the key components. Like then we touched upon creating that API management, creating API provider in your API management too. So then the main role of your API provider is just to proxy that entire provider with a different host name. So that is a key role that is going to play. And to start with, like already we actually showed how to create an API provider with multiple options and everything. Like now we can go ahead with further more topics on creating an API. So yesterday we touched upon like proxy creation, by API creation by using a proxy, and normal API creation too. And also I showed you how to create an API designer using your standard API documentation, and how to convert that into an API. We'll see step by step. Any queries till this time?
With the policies, are there any? Does SAP suggest how we are going to could apply policies when creating a new integration, or is that something that each company's governance team needs to determine themselves?
So policy creation is based on actually individual customer preference. So SAP does not actually provide any kind of default SAP policy creation. The reason being that, right, like some customer will land in JOT authentication or OAuth 2.2 authentication for their as an enterprise security algorithm, right? Like someone might prefer only basic auth. Somebody prefer with SAML assertion or SAML assertion generation, SAML assertion validation. So it's hard to define a standard around it, but SAP will help you to implement those policies in your API management, and they can actually guide along. If you implement so many policies, how you can navigate along that one. So, but it's very difficult for SAP also, like to define a standard path, because it varies by enterprise by enterprise.
Fair enough. So how does SAP support the process of determining policies then? Is that in the methodology or?
So policies doesn't card. Are you asking about how they charge based on the policies or something like that?
You mentioned that SAP can help a company determine which policies are appropriate.
Yeah. So let's take an example. I'm a customer for SAP BTP. So I have a real use case problem. I can actually go and do a co-innovation with SAP, stating my problem, like I want to implement OAuth 2.2 authentication. These are the policies I'm just thinking, but SAP will give a template. So I'll come back to the template creation. SAP will, in their lab, they will create a template, and they will ask you to apply the template and test and provide the feedback. So SAP will give the template as a policy template to us, and we can actually apply the template while our API creation, and we can test and provide the feedback. based on that.
Okay, so the decision needs to be made by the company, but then
Yes.
there's technology, SAP provides the technology. Okay, thanks.
Yes. So because these are all like, if you see this API management is even not directly a product from SAP, that SAP directly did not develop this one. So this is a Google's Apigee product. So if you know Apigee Edge, so that's a product SAP tied up with, like, partnered with Google to come up with SAP API management as per ERP needs. So, but in the open market, there are plenty of API management available. When some customer think in their angle, right? Like I have seen some customer, they have used API management, and based on the platform heavily, like, because SAP is actually just landing in this space just like 6-7 years before. But there are some technology like AWS and Azure. They are like pioneer in this entire cloud space, and they have their services way matured than SAP when it comes to scalability and when it comes to performance. So, and also in terms of costing, and SAP is something like you need to have a deep discussion to it, how does SAP to reduce the cost. But holistically, like, and also like, and what I learned when I was working in on customer project, right? Like SAP, whenever they provision an API management, which is not your private cloud, which is on the public cloud, it means like your SaaS, your platform is shared with 10 different customers to SAP. So example, Apple has an SAP account, or actually like Coca-Cola has an SAP account. So if I am actually provisioning my system in the US East, in that case, so the same tenant is being shared with multiple 10 different customers. If you want to go ahead with dedicated API, like a very dedicated SaaS platform, then we need to co-innovate with SAP and we need to land in a separate dedicated landscape. For that, actually, so SAP is now just coming up with the path in integration suite. How do we, if some customer want a dedicated platform holistically, how do we onboard them separately? So that's what they are doing for integration suite now, and also and for NCPI too. Because if it is shared with multiple customers, like the disadvantage is something like if somebody do a performance testing there, and also like the interesting factor is like the non-prod and prod tenants are not even actually shared in the same tenant. Like it is shared across different customer. So let's take an example, and a customer A and a customer B is there. With customer A and customer B's non-prod and prod shared with the same public cloud. If customer A does a non-prod testing like with a heavy load, it will impact customer B's production. So there is no kind of complete restriction on that level too. So if somebody want as a separate one, they have to onboard themselves as a separate one. Like these are some challenges that I faced in the real world, and actually like then from my customer standpoint, we gone and ask as a separate thing, and still the discussions are going on to onboard as a separate one. So this is something like API management is a new tool with SAP, but it is like, so I'm working in this product from way some 6-7 years before, but day by day SAP is improving in the real core application as well as in terms of platform too.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So a number of things to think about. Thanks.
So we actually touched upon creating an API with URL, and actually like how to use an existing API proxy to create an API also. But actually our testing did not go well because of we need to pass a parameter. I can show you in the coming sessions. So then we touched upon this creating an API designer too. Okay. So then policies, we touched upon the policies like, so we actually stopped SAML session policy. So I think, so these are like access control policy plays a major role for access restriction at entity set level. As a resource level, this is at the entity set level, access entities at the entity set level, and service. Assign messages for your, just to recap, like assign messages for your, just assign a payload or header in a particular API, and just you can do furthermore orchestration in an API. Basic authentication is to implement a basic authentication on your API policy. Extract variable is just to extract either it's SOAP or JSON message out of your API process or API flow, and that policy will be helpful on the layer. So cache is to cache, invalidate cache is to invalidate cache, and lookup cache is to look up the existing cache component. There are I just talked upon some use case on that one too. And JavaScript is just another programming, like if something is not achievable through any of this predefined policy, you can anyway go ahead with either. So then your JSON script policy is a custom creation of policy. If some functionality is not achievable through a standard one, you can go ahead with creation of custom creation using JSON script policy. And to have a lightweight implementation, you can go ahead with Python script policy. So I have just given an example of OAuth token. Let's take an example. I want to decode something in the OAuth token. I can use either JSON script policy or Python script policy. So, and also like you want to do a base64 decoding, you can also use that policy. Like we have multiple options with this because standard component will not give you that provision, but SAP gives as a secondary option to use these policies to use. JSON to XML converter is just to convert from JSON to XML. Okay, so then your lookup cache we talked about. The message logging policy is just log your message at your API management, but this is not really recommended by SAP because this logs lot of resources on your platform. This can even actually bring up your tenant very slow, and also this can actually go, you can see a lot of failures when you use this policy. So the recommendation is to enable this policy whenever you need real logging for your consumer. If your API management is heavily used, it is not recommended to use because this can actually in the backend this can also cause a lot of connectivity problem too. So because it generates like a single logging, it can generate 10 different files because everything is a microservice internally also in the API management that can cause a lot of trouble. So then coming back to what is now every enterprise want to have a higher level of security for their API management. For that one, OAuth version 2.2 plays a major role. So that's why OAuth v2.2 is a separate API now SAP is offering on that layer 2. And then coming back to OAuth 3.0 is something like if I have any OAuth 2.0 token, I can even get the token. And with 2.0 set, I can set token in my flow variables, and then then those variable will be allowed to set in my further processing. So coming back to your quota is something like it's a major traffic management policy where you can define your quota either by days, your hours, or your by month. So let's take an example. You have a throughput of to achieve 100K in an hour. So you need to divide by 60 into 60, like with 3,600, and you need to check for per minute how many calls I can allow for a consumer. Interestingly, like there are some custom development also you can enhance from here. So you might ask, like, is it for all the consumer or is it for different consumer? But when you come to a real world, right, like in case of order creation or any kind of your supply chain activity, you will be exposing your API to multiple consumers. So every consumer will have their own throughput or will have their own number of API setup, API calls in an hour. So you can implement quota by client too. So when you implement quota by client, you need to define for a particular client how many quota I need to set. So if that exceeds, then your quota can be restricted. But by default, you need to just do an extension of that API, but that is also possible with API management. And rise fault is something like the same example. When your quota is exceeded certain limit, your flag will be set in the rise fault, and then actually you can capture that variable in your flow variable, and that variable will be used in your rise fault to go ahead and raise an exception for the consumer. You have already crossed your limit. Okay, so then you can also use reset quota if your API is completely bombarded with millions of calls in an hour. So it is always recommended to use reset quota to reset everything and to bring back the behavior back to normal. So then service callout is to make an orchestration layer of call using HTTP's target URL. This HTTP target URL will be used to call your any, let's take an example, you want to call internally OAuth generation URL, like you can use a service call policy to do that one. Spiker has to just to define, let's take my quota is only 60 minutes per hour, but if you see a spike arrest of more than 20 or 30,000 in a minute, like or like holistically for hour, my throughput is only almost all 10K. But if I see almost 20K, so spike arrest will be enabled just to block the entire API and tell the intruder like you're not allowed to make a cross check on. So this is another API for traffic management policy too. So coming back to your SAML assertion policy, so like I touched upon where the SAML assertion policy has been used. So in your real-time use case, like order creation flow, in an order creation flow, if somebody want to log who created the order, so like the UI will send an user ID, and once you have the user ID, then with the user ID, you can use SAML assertion policy to create a SAML assertion token. And actually, before you assert the token into your backend, let's take an example. In this case, if it is an S4 system, you need to define the assertion parameters, because whenever you create an assertion policy, you will be telling this assertion is generated from my API management. Now, in the S4 system, you need to define who is the asserted system and who is a trusted client. If you make that if you make that trust enabled with S4, whenever you make that assertion with your assertion policy, your IDP will accept that user ID, and the same user ID will be passed while you're calling your S4 service, and that ID will be reflected in terms of your order creation. If any order is created, let's take if you create a sales order, if you go to SA03, you can see the same user ID will be captured in your change log as well as in your VBL and table. Like this helps to track the entire audit process and control. And this is the whole. In this way, you can actually implement end-to-end SSO for any business application. Okay. So coming back to your SOAP message validation. So let's take an example. In my SOAP message, if I have the right signature, so there are some use cases where I need to verify the signature of SOAP message, or I need to verify the auth header of an SOAP message. I can use SOAP message validation policy, and I can extract those parameters on the incoming SOAP message, and I can validate against. So if I store my all the validation process in my KVM, so this policy, you can use this policy and actually check and validate if you have the right parameters to verify and go ahead or not. Okay, so then coming back to your verify API key. So this is something like there are two ways to implement this policy. So one way is to have a custom IDP, generate the custom IDP, and actually tie that IDP URL in this API key. And whenever you pass with the X-API key in your Postman headers. So let's take an example, Postman. Okay. So if I pass the headers key something like X-API key, I pass some token like something like, yeah. So this X API key, like your verify API key, will extract your parameter from your header, and whatever IDP that you configure, like if it is a custom, there is a section to where we put your custom IDP's key rotation URL that will go ahead and check the latest key which has been shared.
Hey, you know, ZaranTech now offers SAP corporate training. That's right. Train your workforce in SAP with our comprehensive program. We offer customized courses, certified trainers, and hands-on labs for both individuals and businesses. Our standout features: bespoke training, fully configured servers for practice, in-house materials, and a dedicated LMS. Plus, get session recordings and 24/7 support. From functional to technical modules, we have got it all. Choose ZaranTech for SAP training and watch your team excel. Learn, upskill, succeed with ZaranTech.
And if that matches with your incoming call, This will allow you to go ahead and make further transaction. Otherwise, this will block your API call. But in some cases, you might use SAP ID services API key. In that case, you can just define ID services as your IDP. Then it will go ahead and actually verify the incoming key with ID services. It will allow whether it is a good key or it's a bad key. Based on that, this is another layer of just to verify your key and provide your authentication. Because some APIs in the if you take other technologies like AWS API or even Azure APIs, so they have X API key as a standard to have the API subscribers, like each and every subscribers will be allocated with a separate API key to make the subscriber to have a individual API key so that they can actually give the governance based on their entitlement or they are actually on the specific scope. So because this key will be tied up to a scope, one consumer will be allowed to only read a particular information on API, and the same consumer will not be allowed to post any information. So the API key will play a major role to restrict some operations internally in the API operation. So yeah, that's a major role on that one. Coming back to XML to JSON, like if you connect to any REST API, and if your consumers are actually sending a default SOAP message, or it could be any XML message, so then you can use XML to JSON policy, and then with that XML to JSON policy, you can actually send limited payload by transforming your entire thing into JSON. Okay, so then XML transform is something like, let's take an example. I have a variable I have an element in my XML. I can even club multiple if I want to do a concatenation of multiple XML element. You can use XSL transform policy where it will allow you to write the XPath, and with the XPath you can actually perform your operation and you can send that particular value to your consumer. So these policies will be used in general while we are making a service call out. So if let's take an example, my API consumer is sending an XML related content. In the XML related content, I have multiple XML element. In the XML element, I use an XPath using XSL transform. And actually I can define, like I can use multiple functions in the XSL transform. And from there, you can go ahead and tell, like, if my function return me a proper output, I can send this output to my policy, and that will make further service call out policy. So this policies will be clubbed with other policies to achieve the actual business needs. Coming back to XML thread production policy. So in general, in some XML, let's take in especially in the banking sectors, so you might actually come across in the future when you do a banking sector, like example, MBC, multi-bank connectivity architecture. In the multi-bank connectivity architecture, like if I have in the multi-bank connectivity, so MBC is a separate platform, cloud platform, which will be provided by SAP. And if I want to retrieve a particular banking information, before you send any request to the particular API which is hosted on SAP's tenant, first it will ask you to send all this communication will happen purely in XML format. And it will actually first use it will from the on their side they will see whether whatever message they are injecting, is it having any kind of intruder or any kind of any malware attack is happening through that one, through XML. They will put XML threat protection, like they will put whether any malware symptoms are there. If there is any malware symptoms on there, it will stop you the further API policy that will that you are not allowed, like it will be 403 forbidden to access this API. So this is something like will be used to a higher level of security in banking APIs or other financial transaction where the data is completely protected. So then there are some APIs like your some financial or kind of for any kind of pharmaceutical or any kind of hospitality industry. In that one, like the main message will be transformed, main message will be used in a JSON format. So since JSON format is do not have a separate policy. SAP came ahead with actually JSON thread protection in combination with regular expression protection. Regular expression protection will help you to extract the JSON elements separately, and you need to use JSON thread protection hand in hand out. Like, so what you have to do, like regular expression is just, it will be like your JavaScript policy. You can decode your entire JSON message completely out, and with the predefined JSON structure, you can send this one to JSON thread production. It will actually pass that, it will check the relevant production element, and it will actually then pass to your REST service. So these are like various policies that are available in your API management. But before going ahead and applying a policy, first we need to understand where to apply a policy. And let's take an example. If I want to get a full benefit of a policy, whether I need to apply at proxy side, or I need to apply at target side, or I need to apply the policy on the, let's take, I can even apply on the pre-flow side or post-flow side. We can actually talk in detail. So policies are available. Like, I can go to our even API management portal. So this is a policy editor. Like, whatever policies we just gone through now, this will be available on your right. So once you click on plus in the edit mode, so once you expand this button, if you expand this one, if you click on this one, the policies will be applied either here, or if you click on this flow, it will be applied here. Like, you need to click on plus button, this will be added seamlessly in this policies. So yeah, so in general, right, like the policies are available at the proxy endpoint side, which is nothing but the endpoint which is facing to the consumer side, and the policies are available at the target endpoint where you will be connecting to the backend system. So like, we can go through that one, like where you need actually policy. So let's take an example. You have a request. So I'll give an example what makes sense in general to apply a policy. So if an example, like in the pre-flow, like I'm getting a request to my API proxy, and before actually I go further and hitting my target system, I want to validate all those information, because everything will be executing in a microsecond and millisecond difference. So your consumer also need to know their response as immediately as possible, instead of holding their information until that time. So in general, your security policy and your traffic management policies will be applied on your pre-flow level. So you can apply this policy on the pre-flow level, so that actually your client, which is nothing but your end consumer, will get the response as immediately as possible. So then when coming back to your target endpoint, let's take an example. I validated all the information about this policy. So now once in the same example, so if I do the orchestration of have caching the token and everything, so I can even have a target endpoint. In the target endpoint, I can even have a service call out to call my target endpoint and cache that as part of my post flow, because your client will be sending in your pre-flow on your proxy side. Example, on your pre-flow on your proxy side, you will be validating your security and mediation type. So coming back to other components like your caching thing. So caching thing, before you cache anything, like you need to make another call. So that will be happening hand in hand actually in your target endpoint pre-flow level, where you will be making a service call out policy. And once the service call out brings back a response to you, then you will make another one call. 1 second. So then once you will make another one call, like, so once you apply that policy in your pre-flow level, your backend will bring the response in the init header. Then you need to use extract header, like assign message policy, where you can read the entire message and extract your cache, and you can put it into your policy. So that's what, like, pre-flow plays a major role in some, and post-flow plays a major role in some. So then next time, whenever you do something on the API management, so next time, whenever you do this operation seamlessly, all your operation will be done in a sequence manner. First pre-flow will happen, then next target pre-flow will happen, then target post-flow will happen, then at last you will see your proxy flow. So proxy flow, post flow is your end of all your execution. So because let's take an example, once you get some information, if you want to modify a different message to your consumer, I want to give, let's take S4 is giving me a different response. I want to do the transformation in a different response. Then your proxy endpoint post flow is the right option. Read that variable in your post flow of your target endpoint, set it in a variable, use the same variable to extract the variable in the proxy endpoint variable, then give the response back to your consumer. So, and also just a main thing here, right? Like whenever you do a API development in your API management, there are something called flow variables. So those variables will be, once you set in this one, you can use this variable across everywhere. That's what if you go to your session here, like you can use your variable when you define some variable in your pre-flow. You can use in your pre-flow target endpoint, and the same can be used in your post flow target endpoint, and same can be used in your proxy endpoint post flow. So these variables are hand in hand because this variable to use transform your, like, it's just a globalization of variable. Like if I use variable in one place, I can reuse everywhere and come back and see at the same place. Because based on this variable, you can do multiple operations. So this is just brief about how policies can be used post line. Yes, and also there are some requirements. So as I talked in my session also, some client want to have a separate additional resources. So let's take an example. Some client want to have additional resources. You can create those separate resources here. So in such cases, so what will happen? So you will be calling the proxy endpoint directly there. So, but actually it is not recommended to create multiple resources also, because you are actually going completely doing a customized API. When a target endpoint extends some resources, like you need to add those resources as part of your API designer, then it will become kind of over maintenance. What in general, what as a real practice, what we do, we try to implement policy API managing, keep it simple, do security and target traffic management policy. But if some customer are really interested to add multiple things, you can create multiple resources like this. Like in this case, they created a catalog collection, service collection, separate policy. Either you can create under this a pre-flow proxy endpoint or post-flow proxy endpoint. So this will help them to have multiple resources in either way. Like you can create, like I can go either V1 here, catalog creation, same thing. But this is something like it's a really a kind of over maintenance activity. We generally not prefer in any customer place like to add this kind of a thing. But it's up to the client just to make a decision like whether they want to go ahead with this or not. So once you have this one, you can create a number of resources like this. All these resources in all your resources, you can add all these policies. That's another feature that you can have with your API management. Yeah. So this is just a security API policy that we talked about. So I can actually even walk through like how to implement quota policy. So then we can actually see how to raise a message based on an error message. So any doubts or any queries till this time? Any queries or any doubts?
Nothing from me.
Okay, thank you. Like let's go ahead and add some policy like quota policy here. I'm clicking on my pre-flow, clicking on quota. I can define a custom name. So like this policy creation. So generally what we prefer, right? Like what's the recommendation is have a standard naming convention so that once you create a policy, every policy we can actually collect as a policy template. So example, like to solve different requirement in general, you can have multiple policies so that actually every policies, if I define a particular pattern, I can reuse the pattern next time and bring the right naming convention over there. Like, so that's what actually, like I generally, if my practice is to have a proper naming convention. So from there, like I can go ahead and define whatever I need. I can include for this one like API underscore quota, and I'm adding an incoming request here. Okay. So this is your incoming request. This has multiple options. Let me take this in. So just these are all configuration parameter, right? Like you need to add a separate configurable. Consider this is just a settings in your button. Like you need to give the settings based on a defined value. So if you see in this policy, it has like quota async false. So that means whether I need to have quota async means like if you give async, it will just trigger it, but it will not give the response. If I give true, let's take an example, if I give true here, so this will act as a async mode. If I set as false, this will be in a synchronous mode. So then I'm actually telling like if this policy is, let's take an example, continue on error. So if the quota limit is reached ahead of the defined one, so then whether I need to give true or false. So let's take an example. Even though if it is error, this policy breached the limit, if the policy is activated, you can either give true or false. So in most of the cases, I would actually recommend to give false because your response can become as immediate as possible. Then coming back here, enable true or false. So when it comes to enable true or false, like you're telling whether your policy is going to be enabled in the real time. So let's take if you make us false, so your quota policy you're telling like I'm not going to enable, this policy will not be activated. So you can have multiple types. It is good practice to have calendar based type so that you can allow the count, like you can either put the count as 60. So this can act as either in minutes, seconds, and everything. Like I'll come back to those parameters. Like you can give minute, time in unit as minute, or time in unit as hour, day or month. So these are different parameters, but every time, like whenever you have this one type, calendar should be having. I'll show you the API documentation also. SAP has its own documentation, but Apache maintains it as a clear documentation. It is always recommended whenever you have a API quota policy, type as calendar, and this is your namespace because all your API management policies are referred through this namespace. And then coming back to the core component of your API policy. So in this case, you will be either giving the count as 2. Let's take an example. The count can be 50 calls. So on the 50 calls, hand in hand, it has to activate through whether it is per minute, per hour, per second. So let's take an example. I'm giving 5 calls, and in 5 calls, I'm actually giving the time range per minute only. It is allowed to hit only 5 calls. If it is more than 5 calls, your API, this will be activated. And in the further step, you can actually catch as a fault exception and give the proper response. And also, you are telling another one parameter, interval. So interval is going to be every minute. So let's take an example. In a minute also, like I can even define every minute or 10 minutes once. Like it should happen, it should check for every minute. If I make it as 10 minutes, it is going to be every 10 minutes. It is in general, like as per my previous experience, what I have seen, client want to go by minute because they want to clear out the quota immediately in a minute by minute so that they achieve their throughput in an hour. Okay. Then coming back to your distributor, like whether this is completely distributed through that API resources. Yes, I'm setting that true also. And then I'm giving another option. What is the start time? When this API should be activated? Generally, SAP is giving this as a start time because I believe they started this entire API management from this time. They're giving the start time as this. We are good with this one. Like once we have this one, like I'm putting 5 and I'm putting time as minutes and synchronous. Yes, true. We are going to get the response in a synchronous way. And start time is this one. And other parameters are as same. Like copy this policy, go to your API management. It's this guy. Just click and update. Save it. Like we can test this one too. Before this one, like if you want to implement other policies, like click to deploy just to check whether this is connected to a backend system. First time I'm hitting, same minute, it brought me this response. Second time, same response. Third time, same response. Fourth time, yes. Fifth time, yes. Sixth time, it should stop. Still not activated. Allowed 5 count. Continue on error false. Count is 5. This should be correct. Okay. Missing false, continue on error true, enable true, then this should get updated and deployed. Make it one more time to check whether this, yeah, okay. So now, okay, let's try to deploy now. Yes, time one, yes, you see, like, I think some problem with the caching of the application deployment, like the postman, after you hit the thing, it will actually give rate limit quota violation, quota limit exceeded, identifier as default. Like, so your quota policy activated and just gives this response. But actually consumer will not like this kind of response. We can actually modify this entire response. So we can actually regroup at 6:15 or like in 5 minutes exactly. Then I'll show you what is the other policy that you can actually append and actually give the proper response. Let's go ahead with how to raise a right fault exception. Then how do we give a meaningful message to the consumer? Let me share my screen. Water API management, type as rise fault. This is a medicine policy. Can give this right fault is going to be for every step error that you do. Like, so I'm going to give the rise fault error message only for quota.
What sets ZaranTech apart in SAP corporate training? It's our unique blend of expertise and innovation. We offer customized courses tailored to each client's needs, ensuring relevant, targeted learning. Our vast trainer database brings you wisdom from the best in the field. Need resources? Access our extensive training material repository anytime. We are all about measurable results, providing detailed student metrics to track progress. And we don't just teach, we build community. Join our thriving social media network, connecting learners beyond boundaries. With ZaranTech, you are not just training, you are transforming your SAP expertise.
You can give us many conventions, quota underscore fault, and add this as part of incoming request. Okay. So now you have the proper message body. Okay. So now I'll show a different level of execution, how we need to do. Okay. So how do we activate this policy? So in general, if you don't define any kind of variable here or a conditional string here, this will be active every time. So, but how do we activate? Like for this one, like we need to activate a variable, like your quota policy will bring a variable, and that variable is nothing but rate limit dot API rate limit, apply rate limit. I will show this one. This is actually given in the API documentation. Rate limit dot failed equals true. So this policy will be activated only if you give this, like your rate limit is if your apply rate limit is failed, like in your previous policy, whenever the rate limit is exceeded, the applied rate limit will become as true. So I can show you in the debugger mode also. This is a variable that will be set in your rate limit in your API quota policy, and you can get this variable. And once if it is set to true, then you can activate this one. Okay. And here, as usual, like we are giving us synchronous. So in order to make us synchronous, we need to give async true, like then continue on error as false. So like then enabled as true, we are making us this policy as true, then fault response. Let's build the fault response. So here either you can construct your own payload message or your own message, JSON message too. So if you want to give us your protocol, you can define your payload protocol. Either it can be text slash plain is something like it is going to give us a plain message. If you want to give a response in XML, you can even give the response in XML. And you can actually give the status code also. So status code instead of 500, if it is our rate fault is true, then generally you can actually set the error to 429. Set the status code to 429. Okay. And server error, you can actually give us, instead of internal server error, you can give us a rate limit exceeded. Okay. So this will print you actual payload. And in the actual payload also, we are actually trying to bring the proper response. So, but actually in the headers, we need to define some more parameter to capture that rate limit variable. In order to capture that one, let me trace mode and I'll show you what is that variable to. If I hit this one, If I go and enable the debug mode, I can hit for 5 times. Yeah. So this is because last time it is actually within a minute. So we got the response. Like I'll hit for 5 times. We go to enable retrace mode, click on refresh, go to your policy, come to your debug mode, hit on more time. Okay. So here I can see quota policy. In this one, if we go below, you'll see all the header parameters which are passing. So after 5 times, if you hit for 5 times, the rate limit fault policy will be fourth time, fifth time, sixth time. Yeah. Rate limit violation actually. Okay. If you go to your policy, this error message, so fault. Okay. So usually it will print here, yeah, rate limit type is rate limit execution. So this is, we given this policy, right? Like apply rate limit failed will come here, like, yeah, it's not coming here now. So definition is fault here. Applied rate limit failed will come here. It will print here, and based on that, we are setting this parameter. But this is a flow variable anyway. This flow variable will be captured default in your service policy. Okay, so even actually you can even give your policy name, and you can give this one. Like if I give my policy name as API underscore quota, like I can even instead of apply rate limit, I can even give this way also quota. If it is failed, I'm telling rate limit dot API underscore quota failed is. If it is activated, then give me the proper error message. Okay. So then I'm going to give in the header some header parameter to the consumer because they will be seeing these headers. Let's define a header name equals to retry after. Okay. And then you can define your expiry time here. How do I set that one? You can actually set using a parameter. Limit dot API underscore quota dot expiry dot time. Okay. So now we'll update this one. There is one catch in this one. I'll show you how to clear that catch. Okay. So it's better to undeploy every time and deploy because the server is caching so many blocks. So let's go ahead and click the API management in more time. Okay. So yeah, it's still not found. Now I'm going to go and deploy this. Okay. So now I'll hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. Now it should just, yeah. So you can wonder why again this is activated because of the reason in our previous quota policy we actually told continue on error as false. So if you want to print your custom message to the next step, you should go ahead and tell like continue on error as true. Then in that case, your policy, even though if it is errored out, it will proceed forward. Then it will allow the next policy to act. Save by first. Yep. One time, second time, third time, fourth, fifth, sixth. Yeah. So you can see your rate limit policy came. Okay. In the body, it did not print properly. We can see why it did not print properly. Here you can see in the headers, it will give you all the information. Retry after this second. And what I have given as 429 rate exceeded. The body did not print properly now, we can actually correct that one too. Because they given as text, so that actually it printed as text without any information. But let's change and give the meaningful message. Okay. The payload as we can give application/JSON. Okay. In the payload body, we did not give any message last time. So now I'm going to print a proper message, which is a message. I will give message, domain request, rate limit exceeded. Can update. Save this guy, save aside and deploy this one more time. Then deployed. Okay. So now we can go ahead and test this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So you will get the proper message. So like domain request, rate limit exceeded. So like this, actually, you can develop your own policies and apply the policy at the real time. And actually, the reason why we are doing at the pre-flow request at the proxy endpoint, so that to reduce this one, like you are getting the request within milliseconds. So mostly consumer want the response immediately, then go and hit the back and bring back a response. So if you do at this pre-flow, you can reduce a lot of latency. Any queries or any doubts to this time? Okay, like you guys can actually create one API and try to explore, because like if you go to SAP API management, I can show you the internet, like we have plenty of policy documentation. SAP API management, It also gives you all the various policies and what are the parameters that you can use. Here you can see you have a lot of documentation around your policy in this one. Like even there is a API developer guide also that gives a lot of information about some of them, especially your how to create a policy and how to look into different policy things. Like it's everything is available in this entire thing. And if you have any policy further reference, you can always go to APG. So APG is a backbone of your SAP API management. Like if I type example, I want to learn about quota policy. APG has clear documentation. So this is quota, what is quota, about quota. This also gives you the entire code. And if you see inside parameters, everything will be same as your SAP API management. This gives you even the clear-cut information about all the API things. So your SAP is actually evolved from APG, and so SAP still have the co-innovation license with Google to support this API management product. And if you see, they have the clear documentation on all the policies, and also they have all the policies, all the documentation on various methods of policy implementation. Okay, so you can actually try like a basic authentication parts. You just, if there are any queries, I can resolve that. But actually, I would recommend to try to create a simple policy API and try it out a simple API policy definition. At least in that you will get some confidence to create an API. Okay. So let's catch up some content now. So if you see here, like even there is an option in your API management to download those policies. You can actually download your policy and keep a handy of this one. And I will show you in a short while how to create an API policy template. Example, you actually have let's take an example as of you have created a one API with some defined policies. I want to apply this policy or create this as a reusable template. Then you can always go here, click on create. I can give quota limit template as a name, and I can give a title, say template for torture. Create this guy. So now this policy is created. If you go to your policy template, this policy template is there, and you can see both of your policies. Everything will be there. You can export this one. Let's check if you want to have it in your another tenant. You can export this content and have it in another tenant. You cannot edit anything on your policy template. If you want to edit one more time, you need to go ahead back to your API policy in your main screen and update that one and create a new template, and you can delete this one. So that's how you can do it. So once you created a quota, like you might wonder, like how do I apply that template? I can go. I picked up one API randomly and hitting this one. Click on policies again, then click on policy template. Click on apply. It will pop up this one. Once before you pop up, just make sure you selected on pre-flow because you want to apply the template either pre-flow or this is very, very important. Whenever you're applying the template, you need to define whether I need to apply the template on the pre-flow level or on the post-flow level or on the target level, target endpoint. Like I clicked on pre-flow. Now I can go here and click on quota template here. So if you want to do only copy only, you can even put copy only here. Or if you want to apply, you can. There is a difference between copy only and apply. If you put only copy only, these policies will be copied to your as part of your API. It will not be applied either on any of the flow. If you click on apply, it will be copied as well as it will be applied. Okay. So now this, if you click on the pre-flow, it is applied also here, and you can see it is created also here. Okay. So like this is how you can create your policy templates. Any queries?
With the template, you have to accept that the parameters are fixed. If you apply a template, you're just using all the same parameters and limits and stuff
Yes.
that you've set already.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to set a different quota limit, you could copy the template and then add it sort of the individual elements and then modify it.
Correct. You can go ahead and modify individually here. So, but this template, right? What is the purpose of this template in general, right? Like, so each and every developer will spend so many time. Let's take an example. You have 200, 300 API. So like we just showed an example of 2 policy template, but in real world you'll have almost all 10 to 15 policies. So, but if I start developing 100 plus API and creating individually all those policies individually per API, then I will spend n number of time. To automate this process, SAP actually brought this reusable framework for template that really help us in reduce a lot of time.
Great. So a standard would be to perhaps have a default sort of quota limit in a template that would always be applied as a default. Correct. Unless you wanted a different quota. And the policies, it sounds like the policies always either go in a pre-flow or a post-flow, depending on the type. Would a quota always go as pre-flow from what you were saying earlier?
Yes, because if you apply on the post-flow, so this is post-flow is actually a consumer is going to get after they hit the backend, right? But why we apply pre-flow, especially the traffic management policy, as well as a security policy, you should apply in the pre-flow. It's a best practice to apply in the pre-flow before you hit the backend. If I apply in the post-flow, then actually my call will be already made to backend. I cannot actually stop the call.
Sure. I'm just wondering whether it's worth putting sort of pre or post in the naming convention as well, just to clarify. Those.
Yes, we can actually even put that one also here as part of your naming convention while creating that API. But as a general practice, people will actually use this traffic management policy and security policy as a pre-flow so that you can avoid the call, we can stop the call to backend. So that's a major purpose.
Makes sense. And all these policies are sort of directly from Apigee, are they? But
so this is. So what SAP did actually, they did an innovation, like they did a tied up with complete Apigee, and actually they developed their own standard on the Apigee Edge because so Apigee supports Apigee Edge, and now SAP also supporting Apigee Edge. So because SAP want to have some reference of the matured product in the market, so they partnered with Google. And Google, with that one, now SAP launched its own product from the framework, so all this already deployed as a SDK inside SAP platform only. But the main framework is tied up with Apigee.
Because at Boots we use Apigee at the moment, of course. So it should be hopefully, if I speak to the right architects, we can just reapply and reuse.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of it's already rolled out into PO anyway.
Yeah, and just one more note, William, what we are seeing, right? Like Apigee supports so many policies. Example, Java callout policy. So even for one of my requirement, I need Java callout policy. They have only service callout because if you have Java callout policy, you can have your library. So I can show you the Java callout policy in Apigee. That's a really interesting requirement as part of Apigee. So, but that policy is not available in Apigee, SAP API management, because with Java callout policy, you have any of your library or your web content deployed into your SAP Cloud Platform or into any Tomcat server. In Apigee world, it's a Tomcat server. So then you can refer the jar to implement everything. So that's what they're telling. Like you can have this jar being implemented in any of my Tomcat server. I can go ahead and use this one. But SAP restricts that operation. SAP is clearly telling like this is security breach. It can we don't want to have a Java callout policy. We could see a lot of security breaches can happen from that policy. That's the reason they're restricting only limited policy to be implemented for SAP, not all policy.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks. And thanks for the details on the URLs as well.
Yes, no worries. Yeah. All right. So let's see. Now we have seen how to apply a template with your API management with the creation of policies. Then we can actually see, we have seen this apply template and also applying, either you can apply individual one or you can actually. So in that one also, so in your apply template also, let me show you, you will have an option to apply either one or multiple. So either anyway, all the time you can actually go ahead with, if you click on this one, I can actually select only one policy to be applied or multiple policies. It's all based on our need. So even if you create a number of template and but if you take one template, So like if you see my requirement is going to be enhancement of the template which is already created. You can always go ahead to apply template. You can choose whichever policy that you needed here individually, and you can actually check in that also. So that will actually help you to save some more development effort. So that's what SAP offers, not to apply in every template, every policy under a template. You can pick and choose a policy whichever you want to apply. So this is about apply template, and in general, like editing the APIs and everything. Like, so we covered quite some content in API, but actually I want you guys to just try something with API management. Otherwise, without doing some hands-on in this one, so you might actually forget after the session. So, but if you actually try to explore something on this API management, at least you will have a basic idea, at least how this API management is working. So anybody try to just create some API, or just to try to log on to his S4 system and find out from his what are the things are available? Like anybody explored on the front, or need to try that one?
To the S4 system and had a look at what was developed before, but I was kind of hoping to go through some of the training exercises and stuff over the weekend, really, and sort of catch up with that, because I haven't had much chance to so far.
Okay. So another one, actually, I would like to touch upon a content on the revision history. So because in your SCPI world, you can actually have a version management separated for every different flows that you create. But in case of API management, so once you have this is a draft version. So if you go here, click on this drafts. 1 second. So it's trying to bring up the content and deploy this one and deploy one more time. Yeah, I can go to save this guy first. There's some problem with the URL connectivity. Okay, let's go back actually. Okay. History is one thing, like SAP is trying to come up to speed on this one. You can see like draft version 5. Draft version 4. So in general, whenever you create an API and you store that API in a particular SAP API management portal, what it generally does, right? Like it will store every version in its own Git. So what is happening? What is they're trying to do now? They are trying to bring multiple version history within API management, and this is a new feature that is not available till now. They are trying to bring deployed various version and bring back. Let's take an example. If I have a multiple version deployed, I can actually bring back my older version through by selecting the draft, whichever the draft that is available. So this is a like ongoing or in a co-innovation activity with SAP. But in order to have this one, you need to tie up to a GitHub. So especially in repository. By default, SAP gives a cloud SAP BTP's GitHub service. Let me show you the service too. This is just available in a beta mode in some product. I'm also testing in my client location place, like, so that is available as part of beta service. But actually some customer prefer to have to store in their own Git rather than SAP Git. Let's see if this current has a GitHub service. This does not have a GitHub service. So in general, there will be a GitHub service that you can actually entitle that GitHub service in this one. And once you have the Git, like you can actually provision how many users that you want, and based on that they will provision that one. And once you have the GitHub service, like there will be a configuration to there is no Git here, like So once you have the Git here, like you can actually add the licensing for your Git 2 separately. And once you have the licensing for your Git, you can tie it up to your revisions, so that all your revisions will be stored into your Git. So and those Git will actually store the previous version. You can revert back that version whenever you need. And actually, and whenever you revert back, you need to deploy your API one more time, and so that actually your consumers can actually listen to the API, because this kind of implementation will be done whenever you maintain multiple versions. So let's take an example. If you're coming up with V1, V2, V3, different version on your APIs, by creating the resources in your API management. So like V1, V2, V3 on your API management, like this, in this way, like you will be maintaining multiple versions. And sometime you will have V1, and sometime based on the new enhancement with a different draft, You might create another V2 version, another draft you will create V3 version. So if you want to stick with only V1, then you can go ahead and revert that version here with your API manager. And this is a kind of a beta feature that is available in some tenants, not in all the tenants. But actually, when you onboard yourself in the new integration suite of the enterprise platform, down the line in the next 2 quarters, they should bring for all the customers. So you can start using that one.